new paradigm for smart contracts is here, or has been here for a little while. And of course, it is Hedera and the hashgraph algorithm that is providing that. This video, we're talking more about what that is and why it's a big thing, as well as why we're seeing a lot of adoption for Hedera. Anyway, welcome back. I hope you're all doing really well. Thank you again for the love and support on the most recent video. Seriously appreciate it. If you aren't already subscribed, make sure you are. Plenty more content coming, particularly within the DeFi ecosystem of Hedera, as well as lots of other crypto news. Let's jump straight in though and look at some of the market overview. Green across the board for majority of coins today. However, we did see yesterday that there was a slight pullback, and that was because there's a lot of major earnings happening at the moment in the US markets. And unfortunately, majority of the largest tech companies are posting earnings that are missing analyst estimates. And of course, this is still driving those fears of a recession. If you've got major companies that are missing their earnings targets and providing flat future guidance, that doesn't bode too well for the remainder of the economy. However, I'll go into more detail in a second. It's not all doom and gloom. We can see that as well in the crypto market. So these things have rebounded fairly well. We can see Quant, for example, up 13% on the day, wiping out that 13.1% down on the week almost. Hbar has turned around quite nicely. We were trading slightly higher yesterday and it pulled back. We can still see we're down 14.5% on the week, nearly 17% on the 70% on the year. I went and picked up another 10,000 plus Hbar yesterday, and I'll be continuing to do that on a weekly basis whenever possible. Not only that as well, Chainlink down 0.7%, 16% on the week, something I'm still adding to. Obviously, it's not been performing as well as Quant, but it is my other interoperability play. And of course, we've got things like Hashport, which are enabling those linked tokens to be integrated into the Hedera token service going forward into the future. In terms of micropayments and remittances, of course, you still got XLM and XRP, fairly stagnant players that have been around for a very long time. I haven't been adding to those positions in quite a while because of the lack of movement, and I think there's better opportunity in projects like Quant and Hbar at the moment. Of course, we've got other stellar plays as well, like Algorand, Thorchain, Rune, Engine, plenty of others that I talk about on the channel. However, the bottom line is I'm still averaging in and making the most of it. Looking at Bitcoin then, we're still holding that $21,000 level. Wanted to just talk about this tweet from Plan B. So Bitcoin is obviously linked to stock markets and all things of value because fiat currencies are deflated. Crucial difference is that Bitcoin grows much faster because of the scarcity. In the same period, the S&P 500 went from 1K to 4K, which is a 4 times increase. During that same period, Bitcoin went from $2 to $20,000, which is a 10,000 times increase. Now, of course, the historical picture here of that rapid acceleration in the growth of Bitcoin probably won't happen again. None of us are going to see a 10,000 times increase in Bitcoin per se, but what we might see is a massive increase in the overall crypto space, and that is where a lot of those altcoins will benefit from that additional capital in the markets. In this model, if anyone's familiar with logarithmic regressions, we can see here that there's an R-squared value of 0.9. The highest figure for this relationship, predictive relationship, is 1. So a 0.929 correlation just shows how powerful the price of Bitcoin and the price of the S&P 500 are at predicting each other, which therefore means they are very, very strongly linked. And this obviously backs up a lot of the stuff that I've been saying over the last weeks and months, probably since I started the channel. Majority of this is a macro-driven environment at the moment. When you've got correlations this strong between different asset classes, if one asset class falls, the other asset class falls. And obviously there's other things at play, such as de-risking, which further drive the markets down. What I was alluding to a minute ago of it's not all doom and gloom. So for a key example here being Google. Now, of course, Google is one of the governing council members for Hedera. They missed their earnings per share by 7.63% against analyst estimates, and the revenue by 0.52%. So the revenue was fairly strong, but the earnings per shares weren't. However, for the same period last year, 69.69 billion, which is the revenue they reported in Q2 2022, is actually still an 11% increase year over year. So 11% above what they reported in Q2 of 2021. This is pretty good considering the current climate. And this is obviously being reflected in the after hours sessions actually for the Google stock trading. Now, what this means is, despite the fact that they're missing analyst estimates and that future guidance is looking slightly more flat, there has still been significant growth from 2021 to 2022, and we should still see these economies continue to grow, and the fears of a recession may not be as strong as people thought per se. So that's a key takeaway there to bear in mind. Prosecutors have requested a notification upon arrival for 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏's entry into South Korea. So obviously 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 leading terror, and obviously that death spiral we saw a few weeks, if not months ago now. 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 is obviously being dogged by fraud allegations in South Korea, and they are now requesting that if he touches down in South Korea, they basically want to be notified so they can go and arrest him and begin to sort of interrogate him, I guess, over these fraud allegations. I'm kind of glad something like this is happening. He needs to be held accountable for what ended up happening in the wider terror ecosystem. Of course, there were lots of rumors going around, and it appears that the authorities in South Korea are taking this very seriously indeed. CELCIUS is willing to pay a former CFO, Rod Bulger, $93,000 per month to advise its bankruptcy. Absolutely absurd. So CELCIUS is facing bankruptcy, and they're asking the former chief financial officer to come back. They'll pay him nearly $100,000 a month to help, I guess, sort out the final bits of paperwork and then sort of help push through its bankruptcy. Crazy situation to be in when you're looking to pay someone $100,000 a month or $1.2 million annually to help file for bankruptcy. So clearly there's some other stuff at play here, and this just goes to show why it's really important to ensure that your crypto is in a safe place. You're not holding it on exchanges. If something seems too good to be true, like these types of rewards platforms, it probably is, and it's a good idea to steer clear, otherwise you get wrapped up in things like this, which is complete and utter nonsense. Some more positive news though, US senators have introduced a bill to make small crypto transactions tax-free. Now, why is this important? This is important because, as we've talked at length in the past on this channel, microtransactions and remittances, think of payment systems like XLM, XRP, even the stuff Hbar could do with CBDCs, they all rely on really small value transactions. And if they are tax-free and there's no implications for those types of transactions, this gives further credence to those cryptocurrency projects and that technology taking over the micropayments industry. Of course, we've got other micropayments like Drop, which I covered in, I can't remember if it was the last video, the video previously, built on top of Hedera to facilitate those really small transactions. Think of donations and tips. We can automate a hell of a lot of that through this new technology, particularly if it's tax-free. So great steps forward by US senators to introduce that bill. Now, what I spoke about in the intro to the video, a new paradigm for smart contract applications. This has been published by Sivo or Parabolic Hbar over on Twitter, and it talks about the differences between ERC20 and the Hedera token service. So in his previous article, The Future of DeFi is Hashgraph, he outlines some key differences between Hedera and competing smart contract platforms. The choice to join the Hedera community rather than Ethereum's was no accident on his part, and he hopes to illustrate this further by examining the differences between them. For token development to be possible, a network requires templates or guidelines. These standards help ensure smart contracts remain composable. For instance, when a new project issues a token, it must be compatible with existing DeFi protocols. Ethereum came to this realization soon after their 2015 launch and were quick to introduce the ERC20 standard for fungible tokens, which implements an API for tokens within smart contracts. ERC20 token contracts are smart contracts containing a map of account addresses and their token balances. Contract functionalities include transferring tokens from one account to another, getting the current token balance in an account or supply on the network, and approving whether a token or of a specified amount from an account can be spent by a third-party account. So some sort of standard checks and balances for facilitating those transactions via that map of addresses and balances. Given that ERC20 was developed in 2015, it is no surprise that this standard has significant shortcomings. So of course there have been updates, but not a complete overhaul of the system. This is now 7 years old. As many of you will realize, there is a sort of paradigm shift within technology and computing every sort of 3 to 5 years that takes place, where major upgrades happen over the course of time. For example, if tokens are sent to a contract and an error occurs, one would expect this transaction to be rejected such that no funds are lost. However, this isn't actually the case for ERC20, since a transfer requires one of two functions to be activated. The first being the transfer function, which allows you to send tokens to a specific address, so from A to B, or Bob to Alice, or Alice to Bob. And the second being a combination of functions, approve and transfer from, which is used to deposit tokens into a smart contract. If a user mistakenly deposits tokens into a smart contract using the transfer function, the contract will not see this transaction and the funds will be frozen. Moreover, if such contracts do not implement the function of emergency token withdrawal, it is impossible to return the funds. So you basically end up with a loss of funds if the functions haven't been written correctly. Another shortcoming of ERC20 is the gas required to call a tokens contract for transfer, approve, and transfer from functions. Consider a user on Ethereum who wants to spend 20 million Hbar tokens to another address. We can then begin to see the cost of this. So a transfer of those Hbar tokens representing $230 or 0.14 ETH costs more 𝗟𝗚. Gas is specified in 𝗟𝗚, where 1E plus 9 𝗟𝗚 equals 1 Ether, then a transfer of $2,000 in Ether. After selecting a recipient address and paying the gas fee, the transaction is sent directly to the Hbar contract token. Here, the transaction input data, which is sent to the ERC20 contract, includes the destination address and the amount of Hbar tokens. This calls the transfer function on the Hbar contract, and soon the destination address receives its tokens. Ethereum users may have noticed that the gas fees are significantly higher when interacting with ERC20 tokens than interacting with Ethereum itself. Gas can be thought of as a representation of how much computational work the network needs to do to accomplish a task, and users are billed accordingly to this metric. Since every token contract needs to report its state back to the entire network, interactions are generally much more costly than simple transfers of ETH tokens, which aren't actually ERC20. So think of ERC20 as being above ETH or below ETH, however you want to see it. And then, of course, we can see that the sort of complexity and stuff begins to increase. So such a fee discrepancy makes sense from the perspective of Ethereum's architecture, but feels counterintuitive from the perspective of the end user. Why should I pay more to move less? And many times it becomes a sort of financial impasse to make one of these transactions, because it actually costs more to process a transaction than what you are sending, as outlined in one of these examples. Hedera, though, released the Hedera Token Service, or HTS, in 2019. HTS offers configuration and issuance of native fungible and non-fungible tokens. This means that unlike ERC20 and Ethereum, HTS tokens inherit the same attributes as Hbar, namely 10,000 plus TPS, which is obviously being throttled with the throughput, 0.0001 average transaction costs, 3 to 5 second confirmation time with finality, and ridiculously low kilowatt hours or energy usage per transaction. HTS achieves this by leveraging existing network primitives to allow users to define and interact with tokens as a native network entity. Furthermore, Hedera smart contracts can control tokens via HTS, enabling dApps to take advantage of the network's high performance and predictable fee structure for token operations. Not only that, the HTS extends even further beyond the limitations of ERC with features such as built-in configurable compliance and programmability, e.g. custom token fees and scheduled transactions. We've seen that with things on the NFT side, where you can have custom royalties and fallback fees and all that sort of stuff inside the metadata of those, and the HTS is enabling that. Comparing the ERC20 and HTS standards, it is evident that the HTS transactions are more efficient than smart contract calls required for ERC20 tokens. So we must ask ourselves why a developer would choose the latter when building on Hedera. Given that HTS is the dominant standard on Hedera, using ERC20 is suboptimal from an ecosystem standpoint. If Hedera smart contract applications fail to adopt one standard, then the ecosystem is not as cohesive and integrations become difficult. This fragmentation is precisely why Ethereum adopted the ERC20 standard. Moreover, it is the reasoning behind standardization across all industries. There are several other problems that ERC tokens pose, namely where they come from and how they are obtained. There are only two potential sources: bridge tokens and other smart contract applications. As it currently stands, tokens ported through Hashport, the only bridge connecting Hedera to other chains, are wrapped as HTS. It is safe to assume other bridges will follow suit. Supporting ERC20 tokens is a bet against HTS being the dominant standard on Hedera, and with the power of HTS in the ecosystem that Hedera provides, this seems unlikely. If you are building a smart contract application on Hedera's network, it makes sense to support the HTS standard, as this is a natural evolutionary step forward. And I completely agree with Sivo here in his final thoughts, and obviously the remainder of this article is incredibly well written. it is sort of counterintuitive to go against the natural standard of Hedera, which is HTS. But I guess for now, that evolutionary step forward is far too much. Majority of the demand still sits on those ERC platforms, and we need to continue to bring people across, and then we will see that full paradigm shift to the HTS standard as they want to leverage more and more of those features. Brilliant article here, and it outlines really well the capabilities of Hedera in contrast to what Ethereum currently provides. The fact that Hedera can natively execute those via the EVM, and then you've got the additional features of the HTS system on top, is why Hedera is such a powerhouse. Sort of wrapping that up as well, so 3 major reasons people do fall in love with Hedera and things like Hashpack app. Number 1 being NFT and token association. So in order to receive any token or NFT, you must add the token to your wallet first. Many of you would have experienced this. If you're buying NFTs or receiving tokens, you have to make sure that they're associated. Now, this is really important. So anyone who is deep into NFTs or has been on other chains such as Ethereum or Solana would have experienced this. For example, if you've got a MetaMask wallet, you receive sort of garbage or scam NFTs or even tokens on the Binance Smart Chain, which are completely fake. And that opens you up to potential to be effectively sort of scammed even further or lose access to your wallet if you interact with the wrong decentralized application, as I mentioned before. This isn't an issue on Hedera because you have to ensure that you've associated the token before they can send it. Anyone trying to send the tokens will get an error message saying the token has not been associated. Secure NFT transfers as well being baked right into Hashpack app. So you can literally do transfers between 1 or 2 parties really quickly and easily without having to go through a market. So you can privatize those trades between yourselves. And then as well, royalties is obviously a huge point of discussion, particularly in other older ecosystems like Solana and Ethereum. If you do the secure transfer option, you have royalties baked in directly to Hedera anyway, and you see that on things like Zoo's Marketplace. So it supports those creators and founders that have built those projects, giving back to them, and it's again something that HTS natively provides. So we can see that there is a lot of things going for Hedera at the moment. Not only that, we've obviously got more progressions in the ecosystem for development. So Metaverse entertainment company Hyperreal Studio and next gen living asset NFT platform Freeversio have a grant from the Hbar Foundation to create HyperDream, a gamified tool for A-list talent to engage with fans in the metaverse. So we've got more stuff happening in the metaverse on Hedera, which is brilliant. We've got Christian Hasker here talking about ENV blockchain and what it is. So for those unfamiliar, Guardians built by ENV blockchain is an open source tool that leverages Hedera to mint emissions and carbon offset tokens. It provides auditable records that document the emission process and life cycle of carbon credits, reducing fraud in the ESG market. Now, of course, the ESG market is rapidly growing. It's estimated to be around 13 trillion at the moment and will continue to increase over time. And that was the main point of the previous video that I released. Now, what we can talk about is Envision Blockchain 21 hours ago saying they released the latest version 2.3 of the Hedera Guardian. This is a major release that improves trust chain assurance and diagnosability of policy execution, as well as delivering the following highlights: automation of token operations, token minting into custom accounts, blockchain operations, enhanced documentation, and bug fixes. Now, why is this important? Now, this is important because it could be what 𝗟𝗏𝗡.io has been waiting for. And this is a great Reddit thread that I wanted to run through. What is Envision's Guardian? So as we saw just there, we now understand what that is. So Guardian is not some third-party arm's length project, but is a project that was built for Hedera Network and has buy-in from numerous governing council members. The Hbar Foundation discussed the Guardian and its adoption as being central to its sustainability impact fund, and all 3 companies named in the above excerpt are partnered with the Hbar Foundation: Dovu, Civic Ledger, and Timeless. And obviously in yesterday's video, we looked at that Timeless release. Given how Guardian fits hand in glove with the functionality that 𝗟𝗏𝗡.io is bringing to its customers, there really shouldn't be much doubt as to whether 𝗟𝗏𝗡.io is utilizing Guardian as well. The alternative is that Avery, sat on the governing council, was fully aware of Guardian and the support it has amongst other governing council members, as well as the Hbar Foundation, and said, we'll build our own version. So, some dates. April 22nd of this year, Envision releases Guardian 2. Again, on April 22nd, Envision jointly publishes with the Hbar Foundation on the Hbar Foundation site about the Guardian and their support. May 12th, Avery gets the Hbar Foundation grant for 𝗟𝗏𝗡 with their primary focus on news of carbon tracking and offset. Avery provides a July timetable for it to begin driving transactions over Hedera. July 20th, Avery talks about final integrations and says it's weeks to days before we should see transactions on Hedera. And July 26th, Envision releases 2.3 of The Guardian on Twitter, and they call it a major release. And then what we see there is the bet being that the delay in Avery flipping on the switch with Hedera was this update to Guardian from Envision blockchain. The timetable would seem to support the idea with Avery giving a July timetable as to when 𝗟𝗏𝗡𝗏𝗡's integration with Hedera would go live. This timetable was contingent on the Guardian upgrade, which was not in their control. Last week, Avery said weeks to days, knowing that they would have to update this today. So if this is correct, we could see transactions as soon as this week. Unsure what else 𝗟𝗏𝗡 may need to do, but this could be it. Now, they did actually come out as well at the end of June, I believe it was, and say that it was partially released onto the Hedera mainnet. Now, we haven't seen the transactions from that yet. And again, this ties back in here. So obviously July 20th, they talk about final integrations. At the end of at the end of June, they said that they talked about, stuff pretty much going live. July 20th, final integrations, and then July 26th, they're talking about this Envision release update. So we could be seeing something very big go live over the coming weeks. We should also have some information on the Coupon Bureau's use case as well. Rounding up the video, because it's getting quite long, is a final partnership. So Dropper NFT, the gaming launchpad and NFT marketplace on Hedera, is partnering with EARTHLINGS.land for their first mint. So again, there's a previous video on my channel if you guys want to check that out. But the first mint will be for the founders cards on August the 8th, and more information will follow. So if you guys want to get involved with that, make sure you're checking these guys out on social media. Of course, they are partnered with Dropper now, which obviously Dropper is being supported by the Hbar Foundation. So this should be a fairly reliable project by all accounts. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, drop a comment if you've got something to say. I do try and respond to as many of them as I possibly can. And until the next one, I'll catch you then. Cheers.